So I'm Brian Chapados, and I'm going to talk about Cappuccino, which actually has nothing to do with Ruby or Python. And it's a JavaScript web framework, so let's get started. What is it? Okay, they define it as Cappuccino open source application for developing web applications that look like desktop applications. So, and by we, or by they, I mean 280 North. And these are the guys that actually made this. They wanted to make an application for the web that would stand out. And they ended up building a slideshow presentation software called 280slides.com, which is actually what I'm using right now. Looks a lot like Keynote. This is a screenshot of the actual app. You probably saw it before I started this. That app on screen was the app, and it's running inside Plainview, which is a full-screen web browser. So this is a web app, not a desktop app. And this is the kind of thing that they created a framework to build. So their concept, like I said before, is to build web apps, not websites. So this is not something that you're going to use to make a typical website where you want to display information. It's really designed from the ground up to be able to build some type of application that you would traditionally think of as using on your computer as a desktop app. So it's not Cappuccino, although that looks pretty good. Apparently this is some Cappuccino from a competition that they had for Cappuccino Art. But Cappuccino apps do look really nice. So let's go over a few things that are different about Cappuccino. One thing is that if you buy into the Cappuccino way of doing things, it's pretty much all or nothing. You can't really mix Cappuccino into some other kind of app. You can't add it to an existing website very easily. You sort of have to like go with it and do it their way. There's no HTML, there's no CSS, there's no DOM manipulation. It works in all browsers, well, most major browsers. I'm not going to say all. So you don't have to do any of that. Instead, you have to learn this language called ObjectiveJ, which is essentially a superset of JavaScript that's based on ObjectiveC. Looks a lot like ObjectiveC, except underneath it's JavaScript instead of C. Comes with a bunch of tools for bundling, compiling the thing down to JavaScript, and resources for deployment, distribution. I'll show you some of the code in a little bit. You'll see if you'll either like it or hate it, but that's the way it is. You know, ObjectiveC kind of gets a bad rap. People think it's ugly. I guess it kind of is compared to Ruby or Python. But I think it makes sense in this setting because what these guys did was they said, like, took a look at this and they said, well, okay, on one hand we've got ObjectiveJ or ObjectiveC and the Cocoa libraries that Apple developed for building all their desktop apps. And these things work. Like Apple's desktop apps are really nice. So let's not try and reinvent some kind of crazy thing. Let's just use their framework concepts, but just make the backend JavaScript so that it works in the browser. So that's pretty much what they did. It's really easy to install it. You can just download a starter package and open an HTML file in your browser. Or you can get the code from GitHub, run 3 commands, and pretty much you'll be at the same place as if you installed the kit. If you want to generate an app, it's kind of Rails-esque. You just capgen my app name, and you get these 8 files. You open up index.html, and you've got your app. So I'll show you something that I put together during a jelly, actually. I really wanted to know how to use this, so let's see if I can bump this up massively. Look. Okay, well, that doesn't work. There we go. Let's see. I guess that's good enough. All right, so this is a Cappuccino app that I built in a couple days for searching a PubMed database. And it's an online database of biomedical papers. You can kind of see that it sort of looks like maybe a desktop app would look. Up at the top, you can search for something, some gene name here. I'll just give it. This is actually going out, searching This is actually I think this is hooked up to a Yahoo pipe. Somebody made a Yahoo pipe for searching this database because their actual search API is terrible. But it returns results in a table. You can click on them and it shows you the abstract of these papers. Each one of these is a paper. This control right here where I'm clicking on things is supposed to be a table view. And that's kind of experimental in the framework right now. But at least the selection works. You can change between different sets of search results. And all that works great. In some cases, like it only loads the first 20. If you need more, you can just click this button, goes out, fetches the next 20, and you can scroll down. So I mean, it's basic behavior that you would expect in a desktop app. In fact, there is a desktop app that looks kind of like this. It's called Papers, and I've used this at work. And it kind of, I tried to just say like, well, can I build something like this that would look the same on, in Cappuccino or something? And it is similar. The abstract's changing on the side. But I mean, that's just a matter of how you put the views in there. So anyway, so you can do some interesting things with it. It definitely does look more to me like a desktop app than a website. If you want to see for comparison, let's see if I can load this. I should have loaded it. I should have preloaded it. Oh, come on. All right, so this is their website, and you can do the same thing. Search their database the same way. Anyway, I just want to show you a little bit what the code looks like, or at least go over some of the patterns that you need to know in order to build something like this. So in Cocoa, I mean, this is a complete presentation of this stuff. Is way beyond the scope of anything I could cover in in the whole meeting probably. But some common patterns that you really need to understand are target action, delegation, ModelViewController. And these aren't anything complicated, so I think probably everybody's already familiar with them. Target action is the kind of thing where, say you have a search button and you want it to do something when people click it. So what you can do is set an action, and then when the button's clicked, that action will be performed. And so this is what the code for ObjectiveJ looks like. It's very similar to ObjectiveC. You can see the JavaScript heritage here. You have a var search button that's declaring a variable. The CP button is a class name, and button with title is a method of the CP button. And these braces on the end are basically the way of saying I want to send a message to, in this case, it's a class. So you're sending the message button with title go to the CP button. And that creates a button with the title go. And then you're sending more messages to set the action and then set the target. Basically, selector is a way of saying I know there's a method name called perform search, and I want to package that up into a variable so that search button knows what to call when I click it. And then later, you can define the method perform search on some other object, and it will actually get called when you click the button. Specifying nil here and target just means that you have a whole hierarchy of things in the view. So when you say, like, I don't care, I'm not going to give it a target, it just goes through all your objects and figures out which one has perform search defined. And the first one that can respond will respond. So you can actually have multiple ones, and depending on the context, the right one will get called. Delegation is used all the time. This is sort of, so ObjectiveC, basically, one of the main differentiators is they sort of favor using delegation instead of subclassing. So you're supposed to compose things rather than like create a ton of subclasses of things. In this case, I'm showing an example of a search collection view, which is setting a delegate to an object self. So it's just an instance of the same class. What happens is that search collection view defines a bunch of delegate methods that it will call, or it will send to this object self. So collection view did change selection is one of them. And this is just a way of letting you respond to when somebody changes the collection view. Like when I was clicking on different things and different rows in the table had another string appear in the bottom, that's what was going on. ModelViewController is just sort of a way of putting things together. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because it can get fairly complicated, but this is just an example of how you would set up a class AppController, which has a model for the search results or something, and then CP collection view, which is just a view that displays the results. If you want to learn more, I suggest you go to Cappuccino.org. They have a pretty decent website. There's a lot of information. There's demo apps. There's a Cappuccino cast site with screencasts of a lot of the, I think they go through some of the demo apps. They also go through a couple other concepts I didn't talk about here. But it's pretty good. They're fairly short. You can go through it in a day. Also, if you really want to get into it, I definitely recommend taking a look at Cocoa and some Mac stuff because it's really very similar. In a lot of cases, the class names and a lot of the methods are identical. You can just, if you look things up in the book or in Apple's documentation, if you just replace the NS prefix of the classes with CP, it's going to be the same, and they probably work the same way. So definitely look at that. I think that's all I have. I can show you guys more code if you want, or we can just take questions. That's it. No? All right. Questions? No? Nothing? Oh. Yeah.
You got one? You got one?
Have you heard of Sprout Core?
I have, yeah.
How would you compare Cappuccino to Sprout Core?
It's completely different. Well, the internals are completely different, right? Like Sprout Core, you're writing JavaScript, HTML, CSS. You're actually using all the web technologies. This, you're sort of you're letting the ObjectiveJ and the frameworks build that stuff for you. It actually is building that under the hood to run in your browser, obviously, but you're not specifying that directly. So it's sort of like a higher level way of doing, or just, you're specifying the instructions on a different level. Like you're basically, you build these things exactly the way you would build a Mac app or an iPhone app, and it just runs in your browser, generates the necessary things. I think they have maybe support for Rhino too, I think, but it's mainly right now optimized for browsers.
Is JavaScript running on the back end as well? Or?
Yeah, everything's in JavaScript. It's actually, I should have mentioned that. So the J files are, they kind of look like weird JavaScript. Yeah, that's because there's a preprocessor that processes those, makes JavaScript. There's a tool, I think it's called Press or something like that, but it will compile your .j files down to JavaScript, and it will, compress them and everything. So you can distribute an entire app in one file. Yeah.
What's the debugging like?
Yeah, it was yeah, that's actually it sucked for a while. Like I think if you didn't know, if you weren't familiar with doing things on a Mac, you would just be destroyed because you make an error and then it's just like the thing doesn't load. Cool. All right. I wonder what's wrong. Oh, I forgot a semicolon. Nice. I mean, that kind of stuff. But it's actually gotten better. So maybe I can show you. So there's a debug version of each of the files that should load. And then Safari support is decent. I think
You're not plugged in anymore, by the way.
Oh, I'm not. Oh, bummer. Well, that's not very useful for you, is it? Anyway, so the new version of WebKit, well, there's a version of WebKit that they've actually done some work on. So one of the deal is that one of the guys at 280 North who works on Cappuccino also contributes to WebKit. And so they've done some work on integrating with the JavaScript debugger and profiler in WebKit. And so it's gotten a lot better. I actually haven't played with that a lot, but I looked at what they have. There's a web page that describes what you can do with it now, and it looks pretty sweet. It's not quite up to what you would expect for like, ObjectiveC or something like that. But you can actually trace through your code now, and I think they've got to the point where if you're tracing through ObjectiveJ code, you'll actually see the ObjectiveJ instead of like some kind of JavaScript representation of it, which is what you got before, which you could figure out, but it gets pretty hairy sometimes. Because all those things with the brackets translate into things like ObjectiveJ, message send, self, blah, something else. It's hard. So yeah, not optimal, but getting there.
You may have said this already, but what browsers does it support?
I don't think I mentioned it explicitly. If you go to Cappuccinoorg, learn, it's at the bottom. So, oops. Internet Explorer, Firefox 2.3, WebKit, Safari, Chrome, Opera. It's not bad. I haven't actually tested this on all of them. It works for me in Firefox, Safari, and I think I tried it on a PC. It's fine.
Yeah, my next question was going to be, like, what quirks have you noticed?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't, like, played with it extensively enough. And so in my opinion, like, the table view thing already being broken kind of, like, slowed me down. And I actually screwed around with that more, like, just trying to fix parts of that. So I'm not sure what quirks there are going between things. I mean, Firefox and Safari to me, like, everything responded the same, but I don't use MSIE, and I know, like, that's, if you're going to have problems, it's probably going to be there, and I can't speak to that. Yeah. And, oh, and no, it doesn't work on iPhone yet, I don't think.
How do you style it?
Oh, it used to be, so you used to have to call, it's basically the way you'd style things in a Mac app. You'd have to sort of call a method with a bunch of flags, essentially, and pass it that. But they've introduced a new theming toolkit that basically lets you, I think you can define things as like property lists or JSON or something like that, and set it up for your entire app so that, like, when you make a button, it will just say, oh, button with theme, and just give it this theme description, and it knows what to do. That's all really new. Like, within the last probably month, all that stuff just came out. I don't have the theme browser installed, or I could show. I don't think I do. No. At one point I thought I had it. There's a new app that you can get to that has just like a browser of the different button themes and stuff you can use. But yeah, it's pretty much at this point mostly still code. There's some new things too where you can use the interface builder that comes with OS X. They have a tool called nib to sib, which is like their version of a nib file. So supposedly you can use that. It's used to not support very many things, but apparently it's getting better. But I haven't even tried it. So that's definitely something to look into. Because that would be the best way if you could do something with Interface Builder and just use that if you really want to nail the styling down. It's really kind of tedious to code like GUI layout in ObjectiveJ. Yeah. Anything else?